North America, which is Canada and the United States, will continue to play a major role in the geopolitics of critical minerals for several reasons. For one, both countries have a long history of mining. Both countries are also significantly endowed with natural resources, including minerals and some in the critical mineral space. For instance, Canada is a major producer of both copper and nickel. For its part, the United States is reported that the state of Nevada potentially has one of the largest lithium deposits in the world. But it's not just about natural resources, it's also about the two countries having very strong academic and policy institutions that can be leveraged to strategize and position their countries successfully to benefit from the groundswell of demanding critical minerals. A very important institution in this space in the United States is the United States Geological Survey, which has an enormous database of geological information on just about every mineral in every part of the world. The U.S. Geological Survey then becomes an important partner not just to the United States strategic institutions in both security internally and externally, but also the U.S. Geological Survey can be a potential partner to other countries wanting to cooperate with it to understand better their own geological endowment and use that to develop minerals. That said, given the size of the industries, whether it is motor vehicle, whether it is electronic goods and others, given the scale of the industries in these two countries, both Canada and the United States must still find critical minerals to feed their own industry, especially rare earths, wherein China accounts for about 80%, the United States only produces about 20%. That deficit has to be met. So the question then is, where do North American industries find alternative sources of supply for their minerals? The logical thing is, of course, to go abroad, starting with Latin America next door, and then stretching on to Africa and Asia. Unfortunately, United States mining companies, with the exception of gold producers, are almost absent in Africa, having left the Central Africa region and opened an opportunity for China. So it may be a little late for Canada and the United States to try and play that catch-up game. And so, in the geopolitical space, when talking about critical minerals, the United States particularly must find an alternative source. The answer is seabed mining, yes. It turns out that on the floors of the world's oceans lies what are called polymetallic nodules. These are round pebbles like the very soft pieces of rock that contain copper, cobalt, nickel, and manganese, all of them considered critical for transition to clean energy. As it happens, under the law of the seas, it is the United Nations that is responsible for licensing and regulating seabed mining under the auspices of the International Seabed Authority Except, like all UN conventions, the signatories to that convention signed voluntarily, and the United States chose not to sign, which is to say, the United States is not bound by the rules of the International Seabed Authority. And guess what? Come early 2024, the United States President signs an executive order instructing the necessary regulator in the federal system to consider applications for seabed mining in the understanding that when the minerals have been collected, they will come to the United States, be processed in the United States, and immediately solve United States problem, at least with respect to supply of copper, cobalt, nickel, and manganese. It one thinks then about seabed mining and the geopolitics of critical minerals as relates to those four substances. This is a game changer because it turns out that on the seabed in the Pacific are millions of tons of this stuff. When collected, when processed, when the metals are produced, it'll change not just the geopolitics of their supply. In effect, it'll alter the commodity markets for those minerals for as long as they have been collected. This, for countries in emerging markets and elsewhere who are reliant on cobalt, copper, nickel, and manganese for their geopolitical leverage, is something to think about. Because the runway with respect to that advantage is very short. Controversial as seabed mining might be, it's hard not to see how having another country that can produce these minerals to the same, if not higher volumes than those that China is able to access is not good for global security. Because we are not secured if one country dominates. That's just a fact. One might also argue about the environmental challenges of seabed mining. To be absolutely clear, if the World Bank is correct, that in effect, by 2050, demand for critical minerals will have grown to the level of 500%. I want you to let that sink and think. If we mine only on land, if we only mine in emerging market countries, what will those countries look like environmentally? How much displacement will have taken place with respect to not just people, but animals? How much damage will have happened? The answer is this. Humanity cannot have its cake and eat it. If we want to transit to clean energy, if we want to reduce carbon emissions, something is going to have to give. We will not end up, whether on land or at sea, in the same environment as when we started. And one of the biggest game changers, one of the biggest issues that will find itself in the geopolitics of that is seabed mining. But Canada and the United States are not entirely the same. Wherein in the United States, environmental issues and access to minerals is a big challenge because first you have a federal system and then you have the states with their own laws, and then you have First Nations people issues, which means even when you make discoveries in the United States, you must straddle these different interests. It makes it difficult not just to explore, but once have made a discovery to then develop mines. Canada is different. Canada has one of the most advanced laws in mining. to the extent that it is necessary to adjudicate federal interest with the interest of those of Canada's First Nations people. The result of which is that Canada does not face the challenge of pushback because there's consensus over, one, who has what rights, who regulates what, and who benefits from what. If one then thinks about Canada, Canada offers emerging market countries a strong value proposition, one in terms of a very advanced law on how to deal with communities on the one hand, but also through the Toronto stock market. Canada is one of the largest sources of funding of greenfield projects in search of minerals. This makes Canada a logical partner for those emerging countries that have to straddle with the ESG issues, but also at the same time straddle the issues of the rise of indigenous communities. But what is absolutely clear is this, that North America is a major player in the trade and geopolitics of critical minerals, and that even when China dominates, it is hard to dismiss these countries because they continue to be so relevant and so critical in the mining space.